Hello, everyone. This is Seth, one of the co-hosts of Engaged Podcast, to bring you today another great episode of Engaged Podcast. But before I can get into who our guest is today, I have to tell you my world-famous announcements. If you haven't had a chance yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button wherever you're hearing my voice right now. So if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Podcast Addict, Chromecast, wherever, hit that subscribe button. That way you can get notified every time we come out with a new episode of Engaged Podcast. Also, if you haven't had a chance yet, go ahead and visit our YouTube page. The link for that's down in the show notes. There you can find all kinds of amazing content, book review videos, leadership videos. Currently, we're going through the band U2, watching their music videos, breaking their songs down, all kinds of amazing stuff. Also, we also have a live stream service that it goes live every Sunday at 11 a.m. And that way you can worship God along with us. Even if you don't live anywhere close to us, you can still worship with us. It's a really cool thing. The other thing that we do on our YouTube page that might interest you is that today's podcast is going to be on our YouTube page, but there will be the visual element added to it. So you can not only just hear the podcast, you'll get to actually watch the podcast. So if you're a visual person, our YouTube page is there for you. Our guest today is, I've known this guy for probably coming up on 12 years. His name is Brett Householder. Now, Brett Householder, he is the executive director at the Lawrence County Youth Ministries, and he is a very wise individual, very knowledgeable, extremely passionate about what he does, and someone that, as a youth leader myself, it was a pleasure to talk to him. It was a pleasure to listen to him. It was a pleasure to experience just who he is and what God's called him to do. So if you're someone who you're passionate about youth ministry, if you're a youth minister yourself, or if you are someone who you are frustrated with how youth ministry is being dealt with today, then my friend, you are in for a great episode, because we talk about all of those different things. If you aren't interested in that kind of stuff, guess what? That's completely okay, because we talk about leadership. Everything you could possibly want to talk about is in this podcast. So give it up for our friend, Brett Householder.
Do it.
All right, 3, 2, 1, and go.
Welcome back to Engaged Podcast. This is Pastor Anthony Claudius sitting here at Faith, hanging out with Seth.
What's up?
Seth, I like your hairdo.
Thank you. It needs cut. Full bad.
I kind of like it.
Well, thanks.
It's a rock and roll of you.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and it's inspired from our YouTube videos.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Today, on our podcast, we have an old friend that's found his way into the Engaged Podcast studios. This is Brett Householder.
Hey.
How are you doing, Brett?
I am doing well. How are you guys?
Excellent.
Very good. Very good.
So, Brett, you work with, tell us what you do.
I am the executive director at Lawrence County Youth Ministry in Newcastle, Pennsylvania.
Oh, man. You just said a lot right there.
Yeah, I've got a nice title.
So, did you give yourself that title?
I actually did, yeah.
That's awesome.
That's pretty excellent.
Yeah, at first I was just the director. I added the executive because I thought it sounded better.
Mm-hmm. I do like it.
Yeah, thank you.
I feel like when someone walks into your office, there's like a fog machine rolling fog out, and it's
for sure,
like brights and stuff,
for
lights
sure,
and all that
for
stuff.
sure. Yeah,
awesome. So tell us a little bit about what that is for those who are not familiar at all. Give us the rundown of what exactly that organization does.
Okay, we are a parachurch ministry, meaning we're not in a church. We work primarily with students in 6th to 12th grade, and the foundation, the Caroline Knox Foundation, provides most of our funding, and all of their funding can only be used for elderly or at-risk youth. And they've determined that all the youth in Lawrence County are at risk.
Welcome, everyone out there. Is like, wait, where is this located?
Yeah, which is pretty fantastic.
We're in Newcastle. It says Newcastle.
Yes, so it's Lawrence County, and they we do a whole bunch of things reaching out to teenagers in Lawrence County.
Every kid. Can you imagine those meetings that led up to that? To the point where they're just like, look, let's just make one big blanket statement.
Yes.
Every kid in Newcastle region and Lawrence County
Yes.
is at risk. Let's not entertain this any longer.
Nope.
If we draw a circle around this area, everybody needs help.
Yes. It's pretty great, right? It's pretty great.
That seriously, though, makes it easier for you to operate.
Very much easier.
Yeah. So let's go back to the beginning, because you and I have a long history of youth ministry.
We do.
You said that you started ministry, you were doing some volunteering for 8 or 9 years at your home church?
Yes.
And what was that like?
It was great because it came right after I spent my first 2 years of college at the University of Cincinnati, and then decided to come home after 2 years and pursue other things. And my youth pastor came and grabbed me and said, hey, I've got a group of 8th grade guys in our junior high ministry that need a leader. Would you like to do that? And I loved my youth pastor. I would have done anything he asked me to do. And I said, I'd love that. And so jumped into a group of 8 8th grade boys.
Why did you love your youth pastor?
Because he loved me. He came in the summer before my senior year in high school and absolutely changed my world. Mm-hmm. He was the first paid youth pastor at our church. And he was from Southern California. He had long blonde hair. He had a really pretty wife. And they spent a ton of time with my friends and I and just loved us to death.
Isn't that powerful? That was my story with Pastor Dave.
Absolutely.
I just told a story, I think, with Travis, our last podcast, about Pastor Dave.
Mm-hmm.
Same situation.
Mm-hmm.
So then after your time volunteering, then you got launched into full-time paid youth ministry.
Yes. 1998.
98. What church was that?
It was at Christ Presbyterian Church in downtown Canton, Ohio.
How long did that last?
I was there for about 6.5 years.
Okay. So that's longer. For those who are listening, there's some kind of life cycle of youth ministers, right?
Yes.
What is it, 3 to 5 years?
Something like that, yes.
3 to 5 years, 1 to 2 years, we're not sure.
Yeah.
Something.
Yes.
Depends.
Yes, it all depends. I followed a guy at that first church who was the youth pastor for 40 years.
Wow.
And he was still at the church.
Oh. Tell people out there why that could be a bad thing.
Well,
Not necessarily specific
Sure.
for you, but just in general, because here's the reason why. There are some people out there, like church culture is its own thing.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're actually in it, it's totally bizarre.
yes.
There's nothing really like it. So there's not a huge association in the listeners out there, but at the same time, it's fascinating.
Sure.
So help people understand why that could be a bad thing.
Well, he had raised everyone in that church. All of the parents of the kids in my youth group, for the most part, had come up through his youth ministry. Mm-hmm. And so when I came in, hired to do it different, when I started to do that ministry different, we had a lot of success with the kids, but parents, older people, and him weren't really happy that I wasn't doing it the way that it had been done in 1958. Mm-hmm. And that was really hard for brand new hired me.
Yeah.
At one point, I had to take him out to lunch and confront him and say, it would be really great if you would tell your people to just give me some space and trust me to do the right thing. And not compare me to you, because I'm not you.
So that was a pretty courageous moment for you. I'm sure that was a big moment.
It was a big moment. It was really, really, really hard to do.
Sure.
Because he was the most powerful person in that church.
How was that received?
He received it extraordinarily well. Mm-hmm. And to his credit, went to a bunch of his people and said, give him a chance. Mm-hmm. Because that church also owned a summer camp, and he was in charge of both the youth ministry and the summer camp. I had nothing to do. My job had nothing to do with the camp. I was just to run the youth ministry, and that was the biggest rub.
And that says a lot about him. Mm-hmm. It really does.
Yes, he and I had a really good relationship from then on. I think he respected that I had the courage to stand up to him and asked for him to back off a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So 6.5 years there. Mm-hmm. Then where?
Then I went to Beulah Presbyterian Church in Pittsburgh for 4 years. And the Steelers won 2 Super Bowls while I was there. And some of your folks are saying, well, isn't that great? Here we go, Steelers. I'm from Cleveland, and I'm a Browns fan. And if I can just step back a little bit, I come from generations of Browns fans. I'm from Cleveland. My first Sunday at that church, my dad and mom came. My dad didn't do church. And about 350, 400 people in the room, and they introduced me. And the pastor said, we're really excited that Brett's coming on board. He's got a lot of history doing youth ministry, comes from some good churches, but there's one really big problem. And everyone's like, oh, you could feel it in the room. And I'm thinking, what in the world's he going to say? And he goes, well, Brett's a Browns fan. And the entire place booed me. And I remember my dad leaning over to me and saying, you sure you want to do this? I said, yeah, and my wife is a Steelers fan, so of course she's right in the middle of booing me.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that was quite a moment.
But they played on that, huh?
They did. Mm-hmm. My 4 years there were absolutely fantastic. Mm-hmm. Absolutely fantastic. Wonderful church, wonderful people.
There's only one other team I could think of that would have been worse for you to be a fan of. And that is the Ravens.
Oh, for sure.
If you would have said Ravens, you would have gotten at least punched at least once.
For sure. For sure. The year that the Steelers played the Seahawks in the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm. The fixed one.
Yes. The Friday before, I wore a Seahawks shirt.
Oh, that's classic.
And I went out to lunch with some friends at a local establishment, and a guy invited me to go out in the parking lot and have a conversation. And I said, really?
Yeah, it was.
And
really.
he said, nobody wears that shirt in my town. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. You're like, let me introduce you to that thing called life.
Yes. Yeah. And this is a guy older than me, of course, because the people my age and younger, it was fun. And the Browns were so bad then that it didn't really matter.
Correct, right.
But the older folks who were like big fans during the Steel Curtain era, there were folks there that never looked me in the eye, never spoke to me because I was a Browns fan and I was kind of outspoken.
That's such a Pittsburgh, Western PA thing to talk about.
Same thing would happen in Cleveland if somebody came in and was a Steelers fan. Sure. Yeah, same thing. Same people. Cleveland and Pittsburgh are the same town. So much.
6 years, 4 years.
Yes.
Then when do you land in good old Newcastle, PA?
Landed in Newcastle in 2008.
And where were you working at?
I was working at First Presbyterian Church.
And that's where I met you.
Yes.
So was I was already at Northminster.
You were.
Okay.
So you lived in Newcastle just as long as I have, because I moved in 2009.
Yeah, we only actually lived in Newcastle proper for 4 years.
Okay.
And then my wife is a teacher in Warren, Ohio. She's a kindergarten teacher.
Okay.
And so we moved back to Ohio about 10 years ago. Okay. So I became the one commuting, and I don't mind it. I like it a lot.
Yeah.
Where she didn't like commuting anywhere near as much as I do. So we flipped.
It worked out.
It worked out beautifully.
Yeah.
So all these years of youth ministry, I want to dig into a little bit of youth ministry.
Okay.
Now, I went to school for youth ministry, and I have over the years, as my library has changed, because there's all these ebbs and flows. If we were to stand up and walk over to my library, I have gotten rid of probably from my undergrad 98% of all of my books. I still have my notes. I have every note from all of my degrees. Everything.
Wow, for sure.
I don't know that I've looked at them, but I have maybe 2 books from my undergrad. Maybe. Okay. What has changed in the last 20 years of youth ministry?
Everything. We've switched from, what you and I grew up in was like a big program-based youth ministry. where, we would have a program and kids would come out to our program, and then we would have a movie night and kids would come to the movie night and invite their friends, and we would go to camps and mission trips and all that. And it was a primary place of relationship for kids. Like, I loved going to youth group because I got to go be with all my friends. Well, now that technology is so involved, kids aren't wired like that anymore. Kids do so much more screen time than they do FaceTime, and not FaceTime on their iPhones, but actually sitting in the same room together. And I think kids are deeper now. It's not so much scratch the surface of their faith, but they actually have some pretty big questions. Not that we didn't back then, but it definitely wasn't what was covered. And so now we're dealing with so many different social issues and all these things. The world is such a different place, especially for teenagers right now.
And good or bad?
I think it all depends on how you look at it. I think there's some good to it. And I think youth ministry is harder now than it was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Pizza and pop don't get it done anymore. That's not going to draw the crowd like it used to.
What are some old youth ministry isms that you were trained in?
I can see the book right over there, Purpose-Driven Youth Ministry.
Where is it?
It's the orange book on the third shelf down.
Yeah. Yep.
Doug Fields, he's one of the godfathers of youth ministry. And in fact, when Purpose-Driven Youth Ministry came out, my youth pastor at my home church, when I was a volunteer, took a bunch of us out to Saddleback to the conference for Purpose-Driven Youth Ministry. And that's what we based our entire senior high ministry around that. And in junior high too, but I was just involved in senior high ministry. And if you want to say we were successful, we were very successful looking at how it worked in the early 90s.
That model.
Yes. We were very good at that model.
What was the harm in those kinds of models? There's going to be good and bad.
Sure.
But what's one thing that definitely, as time progressed, because that's a whole experiment. That's the thing people didn't realize is from the 70s and 80s and 90s, all these things, it was an experiment.
For sure.
What's something that it produced that was not good? Like, what was a bad effect it had on either the church or the youth of the church?
I think it was that there is one path around through your youth ministry. They used like a baseball field diagram, and every kid didn't fit that. Mm-hmm. That you took kids from the crowd, which was just, here's a whole group of teenagers, and you brought them down in the core. Here are the kids that are your leaders. And it discipleship isn't a straight line like that. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's bad. It was nice to be able to have and program to some of the different things, but to say that every kid's going to be discipled the same way was totally wrong.
Yeah. I remember, I think it was called Family Based Ministry. You probably read this book.
Mark DeVries.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
I that might be one of the ones I still have. I don't know. Or I maybe lent it to someone and never got it back. But I remember one of the things he pointed out in there, and this is a visual for people listening. He talked about how one of the negative things about doing ministry in that program way, in that whole experiment was, he said, picture a circle, but then like a Mickey Mouse ear. You remember that?
Yes.
Now, there's not another ear over here, but that would be the church, and this would be youth ministry.
Yes.
And so this circle would be youth group Sunday night, going out to the Pirates game, going out to the corn mazes, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And he showed how one of the negative effects of that is that this circle never interacts with the larger circle. So
Absolutely.
What you start doing from junior church on,
yes,
and it still to this day bugs me, you've got families walk in church together, church starts, children's sermon, kids are gone. Mm-hmm. That starts at 3, 4, 5, it never ends.
Yes.
Because now you've got kids learning that they're separately not involved in the church. They have their own programs. Now they have all these connections out here. Mm-hmm. So why would they come back when they're 18? Mm-hmm. Come back to what?
Yeah.
Right?
It is one of my biggest pet peeves with youth ministry now is when youth pastors are like, well, we have youth service on Wednesday night or Sunday. And you're right. It's a silo, right? If we're going to use the youth silo, and this is where the kids are. This is where the teenagers are. And then they turn 18 and go off to college or work or whatever it is. And there's no place in the church for them that feels like that silo, because you're not seeing who can put more marshmallows in their mouth and say chubby bunny and do all that kind of stuff and have fun. Like, we haven't taught them how to worship, and we haven't given their parents the opportunity to model that, because you're right, they're never in the same room together from the time they're 3-year-old on.
And I think you would agree. It's not that you're saying never to do that silo.
No.
But you have to be intentional about bringing these kids into the church.
Yes.
That their fingerprints are all over everything. There shouldn't be a youth Sunday when the kid can be a lay leader.
Absolutely.
The kid should be a lay leader on a
Whenever.
Sunday.
Absolutely.
Or lead special music, so they are a part of the church. It's not when they're 21 they're going to be a part of the church.
No.
You've lost them by then.
Absolutely. They're gone.
So, I don't know. That's one of the things that I remember just really bothered me.
Me too.
Going back to those other legends, you got like Josh McDowell.
Yeah.
And I remember I read a book by him called The Disconnected Generation. Mm-hmm. And there was a quote in there that, and this is the irony of this quote is, this has helped me become a better, you can apply this to every area of life. So I've become a much better boss, pastor, and even parent with this one phrase. So I'm gonna say this, and I think of this often. It is rules minus relationship equal rebellion.
Oh, yeah.
And then rules plus relationship equals positive response.
Yeah.
That swirls through my mind constantly. It's just like when you have a recipe, right? You have a recipe, and it's just words. Mm-hmm. You can follow a recipe, but you don't really know when to add the eggs in and how much to swirl them around. Yeah. So what do? You get the phone and you call, whoever who gave you the recipe, because you need the relationship.
Yes.
A relationship always allows you to speak through those issues.
For sure.
And that's kind of funny, because that's how you started the show off, talking about it was when you had this face-to-face with the guy. Mm-hmm. Positive relationship equaled, now there's a positive outcome through that. Mm-hmm. Whereas rules minus relationship equals rebellion.
Yep.
I think of that all the time.
Yep.
With my own 2 kids, with Seth, the 3rd kid, Thunder, the 4th kid, all those people. I'm constantly swirling that around in my brain.
That's so good.
So if you're out there, and here's the thing, I want to open this up to anyone out there. Are there any youth ministry majors, maybe, or youth ministry workers out there listening? If you can associate, drop us a line, or if you have your own stories, drop us a line, including also any texts or any sayings that you found helpful. So, so you talked about influences in your life earlier. Mm-hmm. Who would you say are some of the greatest influences in your life? What are the qualities, and then tell us the reasons why?
I would start with my mom and dad. I have great parents who raised my sister and I really, really well. And, to this day, I still look to my mom. I don't make a move in my life without my parents involved. We lost my dad a couple years ago, and I have to admit, I was kind of floating around, kind of lost for a while, because how am I going to make these big decisions in my life without my dad? So my parents for sure, my youth pastor, and the other volunteers in that youth ministry growing up. Had an amazing Sunday school teacher named Mr. Wildermuth. Wildermuth, an amazing man who loves Jesus, and he taught senior high Sunday school at my home church for decades, and was so good at it. It loved every kid that sat in that classroom, and knew stuff about you, and would write you notes and send you cards, and really, really, really good. He had a son named Andy who was a year older than me, and Andy was killed in a car wreck after his freshman or sophomore year in college. He was working for a mission trip ministry down south for a summer and was in a car accident and killed. And Mr. and Mrs. Wildermuth then created a scholarship, college scholarship for kids in our church. And I got to sit on the committee that helped choose which kids got the scholarships. And so many years we would have too many kids that were really deserving. And Mr. and Mrs. Wildermuth would say, okay, we've got them too.
Yeah.
And would write more checks because they wanted to help out the kids of their church who they love so much. So great. What a role model. That's what I want to be. I want to be Mr. Wildermuth, right?
Isn't that powerful?
Absolutely. 30-some years later, the impact he has in my life, I'm emotional now thinking about him.
Yeah, I can tell.
Yeah.
It's rolling off on me.
Yeah. Yeah.
People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Totally.
And you cannot replace that.
No.
Because it's the power of the relationship and the connection that has made that impact on
Absolutely. That's why I wanted to follow the Jesus that he was telling me about in class, because you could so see the difference Jesus made in his life. So why wouldn't I want to follow that Jesus?
I just brought up in John 1 how when the verdict was out on, are you who people are saying you are?
Yeah.
Come and see.
Yeah.
Come and see.
Yep.
Yeah, he didn't give him a argument of he was who he was, but he gave him an invitation instead, because an invitation is more powerful than an argument or a lecture or yeah, that's awesome. So we talked about what has changed in youth ministry, in the time that you've been involved in it. One of the things that I notice a lot, I'm actually a part of a youth group, youth leader group on Facebook. And every now and then...
So am I.
Are you?
Yeah.
And one of the things I'm sure
I'm not.
Then you know, is that every now and then it becomes a place where people come and they vent their frustration with their pastors.
Yeah.
One of the things I see...
Wait, time out. You mean under boss?
Yeah.
Should I leave the room?
I don't.
Yeah. Seth,
I don't.
Seth, I won't tell Anthony what you posted about him.
Okay. All right. But one of the things I noticed, and I'm fortunate because I have a great boss and a great pastor, right? So a lot of this is just kind of
It's the other
shocking.
Yeah,
It's the other
yeah.
people we're talking about.
Is one of the things that I see on a daily basis now, and it breaks my heart, is there's people who are talking about the frustration of you being a young youth minister, youth leader, wanting to kind of carve their own path. And then they're constantly getting blindsided by a pastor who's stepping in and saying, oh, that's not how we did it when I was youth pastor. We did X, Y, and Z, and it worked. Mm-hmm. Why don't you do that? And then there you have these youth pastors who are frustrated because they're saying, I'm trying to do something that I think I know is going to work, or I think I'm going to take a gamble. It might work, but they just keep getting blindsided. First question I want to ask is, why do you think that is? That these pastors are constantly just trying to say, no. Let's stick with the safe option. What I know worked 20, 30 years ago, or even 10 years ago. And the second question is what advice would you give to those young youth pastors?
Let me start with the advice first.
Okay.
This is the advice I was given as I was going to my first job in Canton. First one was, don't ever let your pastor be blindsided by something you've done. Like, I was always, from day one, wide open. Here's what we're doing. What do you think? The first person to see the calendar would be my pastor. Like, these are the topics. This is what I want to talk about. These are the things we're doing. What do you think? And then if something happened, my pastor was the first phone call. And that has always served me well. And more people told me, don't talk about your pastor to people in the church. If there's something going on and you need to vent, find someone outside that you can trust.
Oh, this is a device number 2.
Yes. Why do pastors do that? because they're being bombarded by parents and other people and elders, and they're trying to please this wide variety of people. And if you come in and you're talking all this new youth ministry stuff that they don't know, they're confused. So I always, when I was going to something different, I would back it up. I would send articles. I would send things to my pastor. I insisted with every pastor that I work for that we have time every week. Has it always worked that way? No. But I tried my best to get FaceTime with my pastor every week to build a relationship, allow them to be my pastor, not just my boss. And when I was young in this, I wasn't so good at that. Now that I'm older, that's like interview questions, right? Hey, pastor,
Yeah.
are you going to be my pastor? Are you going to disciple me? Are you going to be involved in my life and my family's life? Because I'm on your staff and we need to work together. I'm all about team. I love being on a team. And for a lot of years in youth ministry, I tried to do it all by myself, and I ran out of gas very fast. And I think if we look around and find churches that are successful, their staff and their leadership are working together as a team, and everyone's doing their part, and hopefully no one's over functioning.
That's awesome.
I would say that to youth pastors too. Don't overfunction. Do your job.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. I think I think another huge part of it that plays into it is it's really just fear. And as you know, one of the things that my dad has always said as I've grown up, and it's one of those things that as an adult now I'm starting to realize what he was saying is that fear has a very ironic twist to it, because whatever you fear, by you fearing it, you're going to cause that fear to come true. So one of the things that I've just kind of noticed, just as I've been an observer with a lot of these youth pastors, these frustrated youth pastors, is that both people, the youth pastor and the pastor themselves, are both playing off of fear, which is making that fear come true.
Totally.
And and I think another huge part of it is, and I'm glad you touched on it, is to look at the pastor and see him not as an enemy, but see him as a guy who's just trying to keep his flock together, right? And you don't want to let a youth pastor get in the way of that and screw all that up. It's just it's like every day now I'm seeing another post about it. Yep. And yeah, thank you for answering. That was awesome.
And don't you want to go tell some of those people too? It's like, go support your pastor.
Yeah.
Well,
because if you support your pastor, he or she's going to support you.
Well, and that's the problem, is most of these people are young and they're arrogant.
Yes.
It's like being on a ship, and you're in a little room on the ship, and you're working, but you're not able to see what the person standing on top can see. So a lot of this that's happening here, you're so certain about, but then you actually don't have the full view.
Yeah.
So that what they're feeling it's very complex. And I would be nervous to give any advice. That would be something I would call a church consultant, because the pastor needs talked to, they need talked to. What's the culture of the congregation? There's definitely certain wisdom, general truth that you can give out. And one of the things that I would say is, you're talking about managing up. Nobody thinks about that. So I was guilty of that for years. Yeah. I just didn't know because I was not trained to see the larger picture. I didn't know until I was like, whoa, I'm older, I'm more mature. I got things done through people, through committees. And, there's an old saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others.
For sure.
So it made my life harder in a sense.
Absolutely.
But I was way more successful.
Yeah.
My tentacles went farther.
Yeah.
But I didn't understand about this way.
Yeah.
Which is one of the ironic things about working as the senior pastor. Because of my background in youth ministry, I understand both sides.
Sure.
Most senior pastors only understand this side, the very top, because they've never done anything down here before. Or if they do, it's just a short stepping stone to where it's like, I got out of college, I'm going to go find some small church, until I can find a bigger church. But they've never worked like 20 years in a church to do these things.
Yeah.
I can say this, in that sense, my life has gotten way easier.
Yeah.
By like 1,000. It's not even close. It's not even comparable.
Yeah.
Because it was so much harder to get things done before.
Yeah.
And through people, and now I say it and it happens.
Yeah.
But I'm much more successful, I think, because I've had both.
Yes.
I've done this longer than I've done this.
Yeah.
It's like the old saying, do you want to talk to the person in charge or the person that is running the house?
Yeah.
That's kind of what the second guy kind of does sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, because we're out you have your job, it's clear, leave them alone, and you're trying to get all these other things done or you're much more, at least I was entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
You know, and you're trying all these things and trying to get things done, and it's just a different animal,
Yes,
I think.
for sure.
So I can appreciate those both sides of that. It's definitely tough.
Yeah, it is. So if we're ready to switch topics, I have some
popcorn
fun,
and all, whatever.
Okay, so I want to know, what do you do for fun? Like, what's your thing? You and I both have something in common for the fact that we both like to drive. For me, driving is a very calming thing. Are you a podcast guy?
I'm a podcast, but I'm more Cleveland sports talk.
Okay, all right. Okay.
You know, 90% of the time in my car, I'm listening to Cleveland sports talk.
If you're a Cleveland fan, drop us a comment.
Come on now.
Here's what I want to know. Are you pumped up about the Cleveland Browns this year?
Oh my gosh.
Are you?
We're trying to suppress because it's for the first time since '99 we have adults running the organization who know what they're doing, and when they're in press conferences and stuff, they use a lot of words and they say nothing, which is awesome. Friends of mine and I were talking the other day, like, we haven't heard the owner of the Browns say a word publicly in like a year and a half. That's the best thing ever. Because normally by now we fired another coach and a general manager and we're still looking for a quarterback and everything. No, man, life is good.
So, you know, we Rams fan, Niners fan, and we have more of an ebb and flow of...
Yeah.
But the Niners were in a dark spell for some years. Then they got really good. Then they dropped off. Then they got really good again. When you go from really bad and I feel sorry for you. So you're going to feel this times a million.
Yeah.
You've got to feel so excited to see, like, here are the places.
Well,
here are the guys, you know, and it's coming together and
yes.
you're gelling. That's so exciting.
The fact that we beat the Steelers 2 weeks in a row this year was really fantastic because, you know, working in Western Pennsylvania since 2004, I have a lot of Steeler fan friends. Living with a woman who loves the Steelers and her brother who loves the Steelers, and one of my closest friends from home is a Steelers season ticket holder. Like, I didn't even have to say a word because I knew they were dying. And the first play in the playoff game, when the snap went over Ben's head and we fell on it for a touchdown, that was one of the best sports moments since the Cavaliers won the World Championship.
You felt that, huh?
Yes. The fact that Ben Roethlisberger didn't even try to get the ball made it that much better.
How many interceptions? This is just to rub it in.
I believe he
Steelers
threw 3 or 4 that night.
5, 6.
Yeah, something like
so
that.
Embarrassing.
It was bad.
Yeah.
It's a slaughter.
I know. I'm trying to be humble, right? But we are very excited.
I bet.
We
I'm
are
excited
very
for you. I'd like to see a Niners Cleveland Super Bowl.
There you go.
For those out there that don't know, the Bartolos.
Yes, they're from Youngstown.
So that would be a cool connection.
Yes. And the 49ers come to Youngstown every year normally for a week. When they come to the East Coast, they practice in Youngstown. There's a big 49ers logo on the DeBartolo building.
Yes.
Yeah. I just want someday before I die, the Browns go to the Super Bowl. That's all.
Yeah.
That's all I need.
I understand. What else?
I like to golf.
Wow.
I'm not good, but I like to play. And as I've gotten older, I like to golf by myself because it's just quiet. And now having 2 teenage boys live in my home for the last 7 years, quiet is a good thing. So I like to golf. I like to boat. I wish I could own a boat. My family, we owned a boat for a long time, and the boat was my dad and my thing. So growing up on Lake Erie, but I'm a gamer. I play video games a lot. And I play with my boys a bunch.
Cool.
The golf thing, I'm just curious for a second. The golf thing, to get out, unplug, and then the boat thing would be the same reason. Is that because, do you think that that's something that as you've gotten older in ministries, you're always around people, you're always investing in people? Have you found solace in that? Like,
Absolutely. When I first moved to Canton, the chair of the youth ministry faculty at Malone College, which is right there in Canton, he came to my door my first day, and his name's Bill Quigley. Talk about a mentor. And he told me, he goes, you take your day off every week no matter what. He goes, and you do not leave a vacation day on the table. He goes, it's there for a reason. And he goes, you need to go to your session and tell them that you also need other calendared time away where you can focus and be quiet, and because this is going to be crazy. And he was so right. I haven't left a vacation day on the table in 20 years.
One of the things I keep hearing in your life is the power of mentors and role models, good ones. When you were impressionable, you know that has served you well. That's, would you agree that that's another theme
For sure.
on here? Whether it's
100%.
someone's dad with their work ethic,
Yeah.
there's always
For sure.
always someone that invested in someone that's
For
like,
sure.
that's my person. I would not be who I am today if it were not for them.
For
you
sure.
know, all that stuff.
For sure. I still run with the guys I ran with in high school. So there's nobody that knows me better than those guys. And there's no one that can knock me down quicker than those guys. And those relationships are invaluable. They're brothers. I mean, we might as well all be related.
Did you ever see the movie Stand By Me?
Yeah.
How about the end of that movie?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that hits you right in the gut?
Sure does.
Every time.
Sure does.
Yeah, and that's this says a lot about you as a person. The fact that one, you've kept those relationships, which in our day and age, it's a rare thing to do. Two, and I like how you said, there's no one that can build you up better than those guys, but also there's nobody better that can knock you down.
Yep.
It takes a lot of character to allow yourself to get knocked down by those who love you the most.
Yep.
You know, that's something that, you know, as a young man myself, with many of my peers, that's something that, you know, with like how I was raised with my dad, he was the exact same way. He still is. And we were raised with that. There are a lot of my friends who weren't, though.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's definitely something that every especially young man needs, is to have a community of people around him that can lift him up as well as humble him.
Yeah.
So that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's great. So you said you're a gamer.
I am.
Now, I'm always curious to find this out. How do you think being like video games have helped you in your youth ministry and just overall life?
Right when I started at the church in Canton, I was single. And so for the first year and 2 years that I was there, I was single. And my apartment was kind of the youth room, which today I couldn't do. But all the guys hung out at my place. I expensed a PlayStation, right? I had a PlayStation, original PlayStation, and a PlayStation 2 while I was there in my apartment, because all the guys came over and played before online, all that stuff.
What were the games? What were the popular ones then? Is that Crash Bandicoot?
No. We played a lot of Madden football. There was a lot of that going on. GoldenEye on Nintendo.
GoldenEye.
James Bond, GoldenEye.
That was a great
I
game.
was terrible at it, and the kids just destroyed me. But we played hours and hours and hours of games.
Did you ever hear of a game called Crash Bandicoot?
Absolutely have. That's a Sega game.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was a PlayStation guy, but I did have a Sega Genesis for a while. Yeah, I'm a nerd. Yeah.
No, it's
Back, I had an Atari 2600. What's the Crash Bandicoot joke? Do you not know?
I
Seth.
You mean
okay.
for me?
Yeah.
He's just gonna make fun of me later and be like, "You're so old. You're playing Crash Bandicoot." And
I know who Crash Bandicoot is, but
lame, and you were the only guy who bought the game. You know, he's gonna be doing all that stuff.
I know what it is. We had a Sega, and I'm not a video game person per se, but my dad got really into like Zelda, and of course, as when we were kids, the game that we loved to play all the time was Sonic the Hedgehog, you know, on the original Sega, and it was awesome. So much so that when my friends had the PlayStations and all that, we were still playing with the Sega because it was just so much fun. And then we went from the Sega, like no joke, we went from the Sega to the GameCube. That's how much time had passed between those two. Yeah. So like that whole PlayStation era, completely skipped over that.
So did you follow each system? Like that's your style or no?
Sort of. Like I'm an Xbox guy now. You know, we moved on from PlayStation to Xbox, and you know, much to my boys, they're mad at me because we don't have the latest Xbox in our home. But A, they're tough to find, and B, they're really expensive.
Are you good?
No.
Do you crush their kids?
No, God, no. Well, I shouldn't say that. I can't beat them at the games they play. They don't play the games I play.
Okay. Do you ever play Crash Bandicoot on Xbox?
Never. No, sir. No, sir. My boys play, you know, the games that a lot of kids, they're into the shoot games, you know, and they just kill me.
Zombies and stuff like that.
They kill me at that. Like, and they set it up where I have no chance, and then they just giggle.
They just giggle.
They just laugh at me and call me boomer and old guy, and yeah, it's bad.
What's actually kind of funny we're bringing this up is because I'm thinking about getting a PlayStation for our house, and my wife's like, why? I'm like, because there was just something about growing up, like my dad playing video games, and my dad would actually get more into the video games than me and my brother did, especially when like Call of Duty came out, you know. And with my dad being in the military, he got super into it, like to the point where my mom had to be like, Sean, you should stop playing this game. Like, it's, you know, like,
that's great.
But as a kid, it was so special to have a dad who did that with us.
Yeah.
It was a way for us to bond, even though, like I said, me and my brother, we never, like, we were never, like, what I would call gamers.
Yeah.
But it was always something we always could do together as just father and son. And also, it made my dad that much cooler to me that my dad was playing video games, and none of my other friends' dads even cared about video games.
Yeah.
So it's a special thing, and the other misconception I think that video games has, and when Mike Kobe was on, he talked about this, is that people think that video games is just kind of like mindless. When I'm starting to see kind of a trend with a lot of people who are very successful and they have their minds are sharp, is that they're avid video gamers.
Yeah.
Or they do something to that effect, and it's like it's a cool thing to keep your mind sharp.
Yep.
Interesting.
It's the arcade now, right?
It is.
We had an arcade in my hometown, everybody's game room. And you would go there and spend a couple dollars and play games. Well, those don't exist that much anymore. The kids are online playing with each other. That's where they interact with their friends.
Yeah.
That's a cool analogy. I never thought of it like that.
It's very cool.
So, so we want to be mindful of time. We want to tease out a few more things.
Sure.
First is not everything has been sunshine and rainbows.
Nope.
Tell us about maybe something you've done and failed, lessons from failure, anything like that.
Probably.
And don't say coming on this podcast.
No. When Julie and I got married, Julie taught in Warren. I worked in Canton, Ohio. We lived in Ravenna, which is right in the middle. So we each had about a 45-minute ride to and from work. As youth pastor, it made me less available to the students there. And I thought I explained that really well to everybody before we got married. And
everyone is in the church.
Everyone in the church, and it didn't go over really well. And then it started to become a big negative for me that Brett's not having people over to his house 5 days a week. You know, he and Julie live 45 minutes away. Why are they living that far away? Why can't she just drive the hour and 20 minutes to work every day? And I felt like I wasn't given the freedom to be in my first year of marriage, right? And there was all this pressure then to perform and to work more hours and all that. And I pushed back against that. And I don't think I handled that really well. And as a result, it ended my time at that church. I mean, it just got to the point where it was time.
So what did you learn from that? What's
learned
the lesson?
Over communication. That with parents, I have to over communicate and have to be very clear about my boundaries. And so at the church in Pittsburgh, first parents meeting, I'm very clear about boundaries. That this is my day off. Leave me be. Allow me to have that day off. I can't be at every kid's everything. I'm not going to your kid's band practice. I'll come to a game or two if I can fit that in. I will see your kids do their things, but my biggest gig is Sunday night at youth group. That's the thing that I'm really focused on. And we're going to have other times. The most successful thing I've ever done in ministry, stole it from Doug Fields, was we had a dinner for 5 where we would have 5 kids from the youth group over every month for dinner to our house. No agenda.
Just hang out.
Make food and hang out. And I learned so much about those kids in that time. We got so much deeper in our relationships. Sure. The parents appreciated it because then we tried to do some parents dinner for 5, failed miserably because parents,
they're not about that.
No, and there wasn't structure. They wanted structure.
Right. Kids will just hang out.
Kids love to just come over, hang out, and see our dog and do all that.
So Pastor Dave, this is my youth pastor that a huge influence while he was at First Alliance. And he did something called discussion group. We called it a D group. It was after youth group, and it was only for juniors and seniors.
Yeah.
We'd go to his house. Now, we overdid it. His wife would literally walk upstairs like after an hour.
That was a hint.
That was a hint that none of us got. We'd be there for 4 or 5 hours, though.
Yeah.
And he didn't care. We would just have fun. We would watch TV. There was always pizza, pop, all that stuff. And so many good relationships was through that. I'd like to ask him if he just created that space unintentionally or if there was a larger purpose. But it definitely did it. That's cool. That's a good thing. That's something we can think about here.
100%.
That's really cool. Over communicate. The general rule is people do not listen.
Nope.
They just used to over communicate.
Yep.
It feels weird.
It does.
It feels weird.
Yeah, you feel like you're intruding.
It's remarkable. Okay, last question.
Oh.
We like to ask this at the end. Seth, you can ask that. I feel like I've talked a lot.
Okay. If you ran into your younger self, let's say 8-year-old self, what would you tell your younger self? Knowing what you know now.
Do the work. Right? Keep pushing. I'm a procrastinator. I'm a little lazy. And a little hyper, which sometimes makes follow through really hard. I wish I would have fought that younger and learned how to follow through better on things and to communicate better and to achieve more. I think I sold myself short a lot because I was comfortable. And that's been hard. That's been really hard.
Yeah, well, that's one of those things that it's an intangible, it's invisible, but it affects everything.
Yes.
That's in your house, that's at your work.
Absolutely.
That's everything.
For sure.
It's the soft issues that kill people.
Yes. I totally agree. Couldn't agree more.
I want to have a follow-up with you in the future, if that's okay.
That'd be awesome.
Maybe go to lunch after something. I just want to dig in a little more. I want to talk with you more about ministry. Do you feel like that too? Because ministry has changed so much, and we're an hour into this. We can't possibly start this now. But is that okay if we have you back?
I would love to.
Okay. Well, then I'll close this off then.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. Well, listen, I hope you've been blessed and enjoyed this podcast. This is Anthony here at Faith, sitting with Seth, the man, here at Faith Engage Studio Podcast. Brett Householder, always a pleasure. You offered a lot of insight, and I appreciate it. We've never had someone have this perspective on youth ministry, and I want to have you back, as the listeners just heard. So if you have been blessed by what you've heard, hit that subscribe button and hit that bell, and we look forward to seeing you next week.